Hello, everyone. So I read a lot, but I have kind of a problem with finishing series when I read, whether it be The Expanse, which is one of my favorite series, Final Architect, Final Tomb, or Ninth Tomb series. I tend to jump around series a lot, and I never really end up finishing them. So I'm going to try something new, and I'm going to try to read through entire series and do reviews of each book that I read. And I'm going to start with a big one. I'm starting with the Cosmere. And I have never read Brandon Sanderson before, and I knew of the Cosmere and that it's not really a series, like they're loosely connected, that it's more of just the universe that Brandon Sanderson puts all his fantasy books in. Everyone rates it really highly, so I was like, all right, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to read through the Cosmere. This is roughly going to be my my read order. It's based loosely on what Sanderson said himself he recommends to read, starting obviously with Mistborn. I did mean to record this a while ago. I have already finished the first book, so after this I'm going to go through the review of the Mistborn book, and then moving on, I'm going to sprinkle some stuff in between, like he recommended. Tress the Emerald Sea, Warbreaker, the short stories in the, I almost said it wrong, Arcanum Unbound, then moving to Stormlight, and he recommends the second Mistborn series in between that, Alloy of Law, getting to the big ones of the Stormlight archive. Future me here. Just wanted to point out there are a couple of audio problems with this recording. It was the first time I recorded, and the way I did, I'm used to my microphone being on a different table than the one I use, so there are unfortunately a lot of thumps throughout the video. I did my best to try to cut out what I could. A lot of them happen while I'm talking, so it was kind of hard to do. But yeah, that'll be fixed in the next video. I just wanted to point out I am aware of it. Just, learning pains when you're recording in a new way. Next video, all the audio thumps will be gone. Sorry about the thumps. They will be fixed. I read relatively quickly. I'm not the fastest reader. I was kind of saying, like, it might take me 2 weeks to a month to read books, depending on how quickly I read them. And I'll say reading Mistborn, I read through it in 2 weeks. And that was not like dedicated reading it. That was like every night reading a couple of chapters and getting through it. So Mistborn trilogy probably won't take me too long. It's getting to these ones that is probably gonna take me a while. But I think I have a list. I want to say there's like 25 books in the Cosmere, counting all the short stories and everything. So yeah, this could take a while. So 2 weeks on Mistborn, probably gonna be a month and a half to 2 months on these bigger ones. And I don't know how dense the writing is in this, because I've seen people who have the hardcovers of all of the Stormlight archive, and the initial trilogy is about the same size as these. They are smaller, but they're still about the same size. So I'm assuming these paperbacks are very densely written. So yeah, it might take me a while. I'm assuming it's going to take me over a year. So that's why I'm going to sprinkle some things in between. I might take a break about halfway through to read a smaller series, because that's what I tend to do when I read, is I read a book in a series and then start another series, and then I might go back to it. Reading through the books, I'm going to rank them in two different ways, just because rating books to me is very objective. It's very much about you, what you like, what you enjoy and everything. So I'm going to rank them in two different ways to kind of get a more broad ranking. I'm going to have a broad, just like S, A, B, C ranking. I'll go through and I'll rank all the books by just the generic letter ranking, what I consider A's, what I consider S's. For me, S's are like absolutely need to read this. With like the trilogies and stuff, I might move stuff around as I read them, because obviously, like reading the first book in a trilogy, it might not seem that great until you get to the last book and you realize like all the stuff that was in that carries over. I'm gonna do general letter ranking of just where I think my enjoyment of the book is, and then I'm going to do number rankings, score rankings. And my score ranking is, I'm going to rank it on mainly three things. It's going to be the story, which is I'm going to break down into the world, the plot, and the characters. You can have a really good plot and have terrible characters. You can have really good plot and characters and a terrible world building. So I'm going to I was going to do plot, but I was like, you can break that into so many different things. And then I'm going to have prose, which is going to be ease of reading and how descriptive it is. For me, ease of reading means, can I sit down and just easily read 2 chapters of this? Like, how well does it flow? Is it super dense? Something I always use as an example when people ask me about a super dense book that I've read, and I actually didn't even finish it because it's so dense, is Interview with a Vampire. If you've read Interview with a Vampire, you probably know what I'm talking about. There are entire chapters that are maybe 5 paragraphs, and it's like 12 pages, and it's just so dense. And then there's other books that, it's very easy to read. You can sit down and just blast through a book. One, for example, not because I like books like that, is the Final Architect series and Murderbot. Is they're books that you can sit down and you can breeze through them, and you know everything that happened. Like, you don't feel like anything was left out, but it was very quick, easy, snappy reads of, you can read a chapter in 10 minutes, like a 20-page chapter in 10 minutes. Be like, all right, like, easy reading. And the other thing is going to be descriptiveness, because some books leave a lot up to imagination. Though they might be a little quicker written, so you have to fill in the gaps more yourself. So prose is going to be ease of reading and descriptiveness. And then I was like, through all of that, like I said, Interview with a Vampire, it's very dense, it's very descriptive. Like, the characters, it could be something that someone could not like, depending on certain ones of those categories. So I just wanted to throw in one extra thing of general enjoyment of the book. This is just my score after I finished reading it. This is how I felt about the book. Looking through everything, it was going to be ranked out of 10. So there's 6 of them, so it's going to be out of 60 points. I was trying to think of some way to make it 100, but I was like, 60's fine. We'll just go score out of 60. And I am going to be doing like 0.5s, stuff like that. The other thing is, like I said, I've read Mistborn, and I was going through doing like score ranking of it. And I wanted to rank it higher, but I was just like, give it like 9.5s. But I was just like, I can see how it could be better. So I'm just like, so you might be like, it's a 10. 10 straight through, 10 everything. And I'm just trying to be more objective about it, of like, can I see things being improved upon, which it could be better going up. And like, once I finish the trilogy, things could be better. Honestly, I did read the 11th Metal as well, which is a very short story. I thought it would take me a little while. I literally read it in half an hour, which it adds to the first book. So it's kind of one of those things. The scoring ranking is going to be set. Like, this is how I felt after reading the book. This is the score it's getting. The letter ranking is where I'm going to say, okay, I might move it. Like, say, I give Mistborn a ranking right now, and then I move on to Well of Ascension, Hero of Ages, like, and maybe end of Hero of Ages, Mistborn moves up to the top because it makes it so much better. So the letter ranking is going to be something more personal, if I can move around in the series if something feels better by the time I'm done with it. And then the score ranking is going to be set. Like, once I read it, that's my initial feelings on it, and that's going to be set. So it's kind of 2 different ways of ranking it, of initial feeling and feeling overall of the series. Yeah, I think that's just about everything. So yeah, it's going to take me a while, but I am traveling next weekend. Hopefully I'll have this edited before I leave. So I'll have plenty of time to read, hopefully. I do like to read when I travel, so hopefully I'll have Well of Ascension done within the next few weeks. I haven't read it as much. I've kind of been holding off on reading it because I wanted to do the video on Mistborn before I got too far into it. I'm already up to like chapter 5 in it, and I've only read it like 2 nights, so I'm trying to hold off on that until I do this. So that's why I'm sitting down to record this right now. Because before I travel, like, that's going to come with me. And I'm probably going to bring Hero of Ages with me just in case I finish Will of Ascension. But yeah, that is how we're diving into the Cosmere and seeing where this goes. If you want to be kept up to date on my reviews, and like I said, I'm going to do it as I finish the books. So, Will of Ascension, I could post the video in 2 weeks. I could post it in a month. It really depends on when I finish it. Like I said, was it Rhythm of War and blanking on the name, Wind of Truth. I was gonna say it's Wind of something. These are obviously going to take longer. So yeah, if you want to know when I post the reviews, please subscribe. And it, as much as every YouTuber says it, it does help. When people subscribe, it lets the algorithm know, like, hey, people want to watch this. They want to know when things are going up. So yeah, if you want to be kept up to date, please subscribe, like the videos. It does. As much as it's annoying for YouTubers to say, it does help. And following this is going to be my review of not the Mistborn. Well, is the book the Mistborn? I know it's the Mistborn Trilogy. No, the book is just Mistborn. The trilogy is the Mistborn Trilogy. Yeah. Coming up is my review of Mistborn. So yeah, I read the Mistborn, and I read it much quicker than I thought I would. I got really sucked into it. It's a very easy read, but not in the bad way. The story just keeps you in it. You just keep going, and it does the thing I like with character jumping, is it's not like Game of Thrones was, each chapter was its own character. With Mistborn, in mid-chapter you might change character, but you're in the same, it doesn't completely jump to another scenario. Like, so we follow Vin and Kelsier, which I'll say I haven't looked up what Sanderson says the pronunciation of the characters' names are, so I'll probably pronounce a lot of the names wrong. But just read the name, I was like, all right, it's Kelsier. Like, that just feels natural to me. But yeah, we follow Kelsier and we follow Vin, and it mainly goes between those two. You do jump to a couple of other characters every now and then, but mainly it's their story. You follow Vin, who is a street rat, and she's part of a gang, and she's working a job, and she ends up getting caught. Like, she doesn't physically get caught, but she gets noticed by the obligators, and Kelsier and Dox, his friend, meet up with them, and they kind of take Vin on as an apprentice, because going into the world, there are people who can ingest metals and can burn them, and burning metals give you certain powers. And so there are mistlings who can only burn one type of metal and get one type of power, and then there are Mistborns that can burn all the metals and use all the powers. And Kelsier immediately recognizes Vin as a Mistborn. Kind of vaguely explained how he notices, but he's right, she's a Mistborn, so he kind of takes her on as an apprentice to teach her how to control all the powers. So it's very much an apprentice and master story of, he's training her, she's learning about the world. I'm trying to keep it kind of spoiler free. She's learning about the larger world, because obviously she's lived on the streets the whole time, and she did travel with her brother, who abandons her, and she kind of just gets left with a gang. So she has knowledge of the world, but for the most part, she's kind of oblivious to everything that goes on. So Kelsier takes her on. They're doing a job, and the job is overthrowing the Emperor. No, not the Emperor, the Lord Ruler. So Kelsier takes her on for a job, and the job is overthrowing the Lord Ruler, who is kind of an immortal god in this world. And he's very much the mysterious big bad. He's very evil. So there are noblemen and there are Ska, and the Ska are they're the proletariat. They're the lower class people. It's kind of implied they're a different race, but at the same time, it's not. It's very vague on, are they all just humans? Because you do hear human, but it's kind of just, it's very vague on if it's race, like ethnicity, or if it's like alien race, like elves, dwarves, like that kind of race. So it's kind of vague, and I'm assuming you find out more as you go on, because the whole story is the Lord Ruler has wiped out history. No one really knows like anything before, 1,000 years ago when he took power, and no one really knows who the Lord Ruler is. So that's kind of the mystery of the first book. Is they have a job, and the job is to overthrow the Lord Ruler and help the Ska be taken out of slavery. So that is the basic gist of the first book, without getting into spoilers. I'll do my letter ranking, and then I'll kind of break down, or not my letter ranking. I'll do my, actually, yeah, I'll start. So generally, after reading the book, I'll rank it an A as my letter ranking. It's a great book. Like I said, I read it 2 weeks. Like every night, I was like, all right, before I go to bed, I'm reading a couple of chapters. I like it. It kept me interested. I kept reading it. I was very much like, this is very much a book I like. So, letter ranking wise, I'll rank it right now at an A. Because it is the first book in a trilogy, it does do a lot of the heavy lifting of, it's got to set up the main characters. It's got to set up the rules of the world. It's got to set up the world. It's got to set up so much stuff that I feel like as I get to the end of the trilogy, it'll be better. Like, it was not a bad book by far. So that's why I'm giving it an A. Right now, I feel like I do have a couple of things I would have liked different, but for now, it is a great start to a trilogy. It does a very good job of explaining the rules. It's a very hard magic system, which I know, like I said, I haven't read Sanderson's books, but I know he is known for hard magic systems that are very clearly explained. And at least in the knowledge of the characters, the rules of the magic system are very clearly explained. Of, you ingest a certain metal, you burn it, you get a certain power. Like, certain people can only use one power. There are people that can use all of the powers. And then, so yeah, it's like there are certain metals there are only certain metals that you can use to get powers, and each power has a positive and they call it push and pull. Every power has a push, every power has a pull. So it is very well explained very early on, so you can just immediately know, like, okay, they're talking about burning steel. I know what steel does. They're talking about burning tin. I know what tin does. Like, it's very well explained, and it builds the world well enough that, yeah, I'm gonna put it to an A. And going into the number ranking, I'm probably gonna do a little bit more spoilerish. So, if you haven't read it yet, I do recommend it. Like, it is an A. Like, it's very much a book I would say, if you haven't read it and you're a fan of fantasy books with, like, a hard magic system, I very much recommend it. So yeah, if you don't want spoilers, I give it an A, and I very much recommend it. And like I said, I've already started the second book, and I had to stop myself from reading it until I recorded this video. But yeah, I'm gonna do the number ranking. I might put a time code for where my number ranking of the final score of the number ranking is. So if you want to jump to that to not get spoiled, time code, wherever. And yeah, Now, for the number ranking, like I said, I'm probably going to get a bit more into spoilers because it's going to be a bit more in-depth talking about why I feel the way I do with scores. Yeah, let's get to the number ranking. Starting off the number ranking, we're going to start with plot. So essentially the story is Yurdrin hires Cosmere and his friends for a job, and the job is overthrowing the Lord Ruler. The whole story revolves around them being hired for the job and them working through the job. And Vin gets picked up, and her whole part of the job is she is completely unknown because a lot of the group has done other jobs where noblemen might recognize them, so they can't infiltrate the nobility. Vin, however, is completely unknown, so it follows more of her story being implanted into the spiral of she has to infiltrate the nobility through balls, and she goes to balls and, talks to the young noblemen or the young nobles and learns things while also Cosmere is teaching her allomancy. With her and Cosmere, it comes to the master and apprentice story of, he has his reasons for going after the Lord Ruler, and it kind of, they create a bond of, like, him and his wife always wanted a daughter, so she's the daughter they never had, and he trains her and brings her up being like a full-fledged Mistborn. So it's kind of I hate using the word generic, because generic has a very negative connotation. I'm saying generic, but not in a bad way. It's a very classic plot of the master and apprentice and the proletariat against the nobility. Like, the plot is mixed of two very classic story tropes, and there are a lot of I don't want to say overused story tropes, but there are a lot of tropes in the book that, like, if you read a lot and you read a lot of fantasy and everything, you can very much see what's coming. Like, not getting into like deep spoilers. Well, I did say I was going to get into more spoilers of this. So the whole thing is allomancy. You ingest the metals and burn them. There is then another magic system, which you don't find out about until about halfway through the story. Is it fluoromancy? Feruchemical. Feruchemical. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. But feruchemical. Like, however you would pronounce that. Is a much older version of allomancy, where instead of ingesting metals and burn them, you wear the metals and you put your own power into them, whether it be memories, strength, age, speed. Like, you store your own power in them to use later on. Kind of when you are introduced to that power, it's because like I said, it is very, very classic tropes. I immediately knew how the story was not how it was gonna end, but I knew the big twist that was coming at the very end of the story, which is that the Lord Ruler is both a feruchemical and an allomancer. He can do both. Because the entire time they're like, how has he lived this long? Why is he so powerful? Like, there are a couple of times where they don't see him, but he's in a carriage nearby and they can feel his power. Because there's copper, which is supposed to block some of the powers. It's supposed to hide you when you're using your allomancy. And Vin can still feel him. And Cosmere is like, that's not possible. Like, it blocks everything. And she's like, no, I definitely can still feel him. Something is wrong. And as soon as you find out about feruchemical and Vin makes that note of even burning her copper, she can still feel him, I was like, he's gonna have both powers. Like, he's 1,000 years old, and feruchemical is from that time period, and they say before he took power, there was no signs of allomancy. That I was like, he's gonna have both powers. So, like I said, if you if you have read plenty of fantasy books, you are gonna mostly know how the story beats hit. There was one twist that happened. I've already kind of gotten into spoilers, but big spoiler, Kelsier sacrifices himself at the end to become a martyr. That I wasn't really expecting, but once it happens, you're like, yeah, that fits his character. He very much was ready to die for this cause of overthrowing the Lord Ruler. So while that one I didn't necessarily call he was going to die, again, it fits into the old master and the apprentice, Star Wars, Luke and Obi-Wan, Gandalf and Frodo. Like, oh, Gandalf doesn't die. Gandalf doesn't die in Lord of the Rings. But it's the very, I'm trying to think of any other ones. It's a very old trope in the master and apprentice story of, in order to grow, in order for the apprentice to grow, the master needs to die. Like, they've taught them everything they can. The next step is they need to die or leave, and the apprentice is on their own and needs to come into their own power. So it made very much sense, like in the trope of master and apprentice, that Kelsier needed to die, and it's the only way they end up overthrowing the Lord Ruler in the end. My biggest gripe with the plot is that they kill the Lord Ruler. It very much felt, not to bring Star Wars back up again, it very much felt like Snoke is, through the whole book, you don't see the Lord Ruler. Like, you know nothing about him, except for he's very powerful, and he's 1,000 years old. And then it's not until Kelsier dies that you see him. Like, he's the one that ends up killing Kelsier. And, then it's like 2 chapters later, he dies. Like, they kill him. And it felt very, not anticlimactic, but it felt like they just needed him to be dead to go on to the next book. Because very much to kind of go into the classic trope of the big bad ruler who was really helping the world. He drops the classic line of, "You don't know what I've been doing to keep the world safe." So he drops the trope of he was being evil to protect the world from another evil, which it's my only real complaint about the story is I would have liked for them to learn his secret of, for one, so they find a journal. Well, they call it the logbook, but they find a journal of the Hero of Ages from 1,000 years ago and his journey to the Well of Ascension to take on the power to save the world. And the entire time they're reading it, they are like, this is the Lord Ruler. And then the 11th metal is, you never actually get told which one the 11th metal is. I'm assuming it's an alloy of gold. Anyway, so they're reading the logbook and they assume the person writing the logbook is the Lord Ruler, who takes on the power and turns evil and takes over the world instead of saving it. What Vin realizes when she burns the 11th metal, which shows her people who they were in the past, she kind of sees a ghost image of people she's looking at and how they were in the past. When she realizes that the person in the logbook is not the Lord Ruler, it was one of the men that were helping, the Terrace men, that was helping the Lord Ruler get to, well, not the Lord Ruler, the Hero of Ages, get to the Well of Ascension so he could take on the power. And the Terrace men disagreed with him becoming the Hero of Ages. So he ends up killing him, and the assumption is he takes the power himself and becomes the Lord Ruler and takes over the world. My biggest gripe is that they kill him in the first book. It feels very much like he's built up so much and then he just dies. And it's like, okay, what now? And like I said, I have read the first couple of chapters of the next one, so I know where the story's going, but it was very much, I would have liked him to escape and be weakened, because it's kind of one of those things that they say, like, this is it. This is our only moment to kill him. And in the fight, there isn't really anything that makes it feel like Vin couldn't beat him another time. She learns the secret. She learns his weakness. So, like, if he had escaped and just been weakened, like, he could have been something else. But, like, he could have been in the second book behind, like, more out in the open, of instead of being the secret big bad that you don't see. Like, he's more of the upfront big bad, and you have the next big bad that he's holding back, kind of, because he's now been weakened. You see that rising up. I can see why Sanderson didn't do that, having read the first couple of chapters of the next book. Of it opens it up more to the world, which I was going to do characters, but I guess I'll do world building next, because this is a good segue to the world. Is you don't really learn much about the larger world in the first book. You're told about it, in the opening. Kelsier is at a plantation, and he goes and he kills the Lord and sets the Ska free. And then the rest of the book is mostly in the main capital of Luthendale. I'm blanking on names now that I'm doing this. Where's the map? I want to say it's Luthendale. I was close. But yeah, so you mostly spend the entire first book in Luthendale. And you're kind of told about other places, but it does a good job of building the foundation for the world. But you're also getting the foundation of the world from the characters. So what characters don't know, you aren't told. So there are ash mounts, which I'm assuming are volcanoes, that they act up and it rains ash down. So a lot of it is there is ash all over the place. You can tell who is noble and who is Ska based on how clean they are. Obviously, the nobles have the wealth to keep everything they own clean, whereas the Ska are the slaves and the proletariat, and they obviously can't afford to clean their clothes, so they're very much covered in soot and ash. And then at night, you have the mists that come out, and then the big mystery is, why do they call them Mistborn? And most of the time, they are out at night in the mists. And so you're told about the broader world. Like, you're told about Allomancy is very well described. And then the world itself, you're told about it, but it's not broadly told. You don't get this entire chapter of exposition of, this city is known for this, and this is, there are ash mounts. It's very organically given to you, because you only are told what the characters know. And even Kelsier, he has a drawing of a flower that his wife always carried. And Vin is like, what's a flower? Because in a world that constantly has ash falling on it, someone other than a nobleman isn't gonna have a flower. The flowers aren't just gonna be all over the place, because they need to be cleaned and taken care of, and the ash kept off of them. So it's kind of, you learn that a lot of the history has been lost. You have Sarah's. Now that I'm going to do this, I'm blanking on names. You have Sazed, who is a terraceman who uses ferrochemical, and he kind of records history. He's a keeper. His whole job is to record his memories to pass on to his fellow keepers so that they can keep history alive. So through him, you learn about the world, the greater world, but it's very broad, which it isn't a terrible thing, because it leaves it open for expansion in the next stories. If you were to explicitly explain everything in the first book, you get very locked in. So the world isn't overly explained, but what you need to know is very well explained. And I realized I didn't give a lot of scores, so I think I'll go through all of them, and then I'll give them all a score at the end. So yeah, the world is well enough explained, but there's stuff left up to mystery for you to be like, okay, I want to find out what this is. Why are they called Mistborn? What are the Ash Mounts? Where did alchemancy come from? Like, there's enough of the world left open that it allows Sanderson to explore it, possibly in later books. So going to the characters, again aren't bad characters, but they're very tropey characters. You have Vin, who is she's the small little girl, street urchin, very shy, very withheld, and it's very well explained why. Like, her brother was abusive and brought her all over the place. Like, they went from city to city. You find out later he was actually protecting her. That the entire time she thinks he abandoned her, and like, he was very abusive, and he was just trying to protect her. Like, you find out very end of the book that he was trying to protect her, and he actually died protecting her. So the characters, to go off of that, the characters are very basic, but as you go through, you're told why the character's that way, and they make very much sense why they are that way. So Vin is the classic street urchin, very small, malnourished, very skittish, and always looking for a place to hide and escape, because that is the life that she lived. You have Cosmere, who is very sarcastic and cracks a lot of jokes and doesn't take things very seriously, and at first it's kind of like, okay, he's kind of the trickster kind of person. He's just like, haha, yeah, I'm like, because he's very powerful, he's a Mistborn, so it's like he knows, like, I can take on just about anyone, so I'm not afraid of anything. So he's very jokey. You find out later on that he actually has a very tragic backstory of, they were going to rob the Lord Ruler, they get caught, he gets sent to the pits of Halcyon. It is implied by the Lord Ruler that his wife betrayed him. You find out later, well, you don't find out, because that's the thing, is you learn things very much by what the characters know. Is when Vin realizes she can still feel the Lord Ruler, she lets Cosmere know, like, it's possible your wife didn't intentionally betray you. It was your smoker, who is a person who burns copper to hide your allomancy. It's possible that the Lord Ruler saw through that, and Vin's wife was a tin eye, I believe. She was a tin eye. So she burnt tin and her senses were increased. So she was burning tin, and it's possible the Lord Ruler saw through the copper, and that's how he found them and caught them. So she did cause them to be caught, but indirectly, because they assumed that they wouldn't be able to see through the copper cloud. And so he gets sent to prison. His wife gets sent to prison with him. She ends up dying. He then goes on a mad rampage because his power unleashes, and he ends up escaping prison. So, you find out he has a very tragic backstory, and it's not him being sarcastic of like, haha, I'm powerful and don't care. It's, he doesn't care if he dies. He's very much like, his mission is to take out the Lord Ruler, and if he dies while he's doing it, that's fine with him, because he doesn't plan on living that long anyways. And then you have the side characters like Ham, who's a thug who burns pewter that makes you stronger. You have Dox, who isn't a misting. He doesn't have allomancy, but he kind of manages the money and all the contracts, and he's kind of the, not accountant, but he's the businessman of the group that keeps everything managed and well. And you have Clubs, who's the smoker, and like, you learn all their backstories to be like, okay, they are very, very typical tropey characters, but the reason they are those tropey characters is well explained. Like, they all fit well into the story. So them being the typical, like, he's the tough guy who's, the ex-mercenary soldier guy. Dox is the accountant, and he went into that because he was a slave ska, well, plantation ska is what they call them, ex-plantation ska. He escaped, and he found Kelsier, and they kind of went into that. So he very much wanted to be able to manage things, like have more control in his life. So like Clubs is the kind of gruff, like I'm gonna sit in the corner and scowl at all of you, but it's because he is the smoker of the group. He hides everyone, so he very much has to be the I don't get noticed type of person. Like, don't stick close to me because I can't get noticed. Like, if I get noticed, you're all gonna get exposed. So it's very well explained, even though they are very stereotypical character tropes. Is very well explained why they are that way. And I'm gonna kind of wrap the 11th Metal into this as well, because it's a very short story. It's about Kelsier and his master going out, and it's Kelsier's final test to be a Mistborn, as he has to fight and defeat another Mistborn. But when they go and fight this nobleman, they also find out that he is researching the 11th Metal. That's how Kelsier finds out about the 11th Metal. They don't really know what it does, but they know there's another metal. It's not until the end of Mistborn that they find it. So reading Mistborn and then the 11th Metal go very well hand in hand, because it very much explains how he found out about the 11th Metal, and Kelsier kind of mentions his mentor and everything in Mistborn, so it kind of brings that in. So it's very good to read 11th Metal after that. Also, I haven't gotten very far in Well of Ascension, but there's a character in that I'm assuming you want to read the 11th Metal before you get to that character. I don't know who exactly it is yet, but if Mistborn was very, tropey, then I'm pretty sure I know who the character is. I'm only 4 chapters in, and I'm pretty sure I know who the character is. The mysterious character is in Well of Ascension. I'll find out if I'm right or wrong. But, so yeah, I would definitely recommend reading Mistborn, then the 11th Metal. It's a very nice, you don't need to read it, but it's a very nice kind of additive onto Mistborn. You find out how Kelsier found out about the 11th Metal. It's also one of Kelsier's initial, it's after his visit to the Pits of Halcyon. So he knows noblemen are kind of cruel, but it's his initial exposure to that. Almost all noblemen are cruel. He just assumes the Lord Ruler is, but it's like his initial, when they go to the nobleman's keep and they break into his lab, there's a bunch of Scott tied up for experimentation. So you learn it's his initial exposure to, it's not just the Lord Ruler. All the noblemen are like this. And it kind of explains his bloodthirst for just killing them all in Mistborn. So this wasn't the way I intended of doing it, but I'll go through it. So for plot, I'm going to give it an 8.5 out of 10. Like I said, it's a good story. It's very, very tropey of it's a very classic story trope, or story arc. I should stop saying trope. It's a very classic story arc, and it's well done. So I'm going to give it an 8.5. It could have been better. Could have been a lot worse. And like I said, I'm going to try to not give out a whole lot of 9s, 9.5s and all that, because I want to be more realistic about the score. Because if I give everything a 9.5 and then something really blows me away, it's going to be like, well, it's not perfect, but then it's a 9.7. So for the time being, plot, I'm going to give it an 8.5. The world, I'm going to give it an 8. Like I said earlier, it is the first book in a trilogy, so it has to do a lot of the heavy lifting. But again, you don't learn a whole lot about the world. You learn about the rules of the world, but the world as a whole, you're given a map of the world, and you don't visit any of it. You go to a couple of other places, but for the most part, you are only in Luthadel, the main capital. You're only there. So for world, I'm going to give it an 8. Characters, I'm also going to give it an 8. Like I said, the characters are very stereotypical, fantasy master and apprentice with some sidekick characters. Like, it's very, very stereotypical characters, which I feel like it's going to build on. So, yeah, with the 11th Metal and Mistborn, I'm going to give the characters an 8. So, for story overall, out of a possible 30, it gets 24.5. Again, not bad. I want to keep the scores kind of realistic. Obviously, if it's something like, not to use grading, but it's a B. It's good. But there are a couple of things I would have liked to be slightly different. When did this come out? All right, so copyright is 2006. So the book was initially released. Book was initially released in 2006. So, fantasy was, it was big, but it was kind of more growing. So, 2006, it was probably a lot more original. Now that I'm looking at when it was actually written, but so very well, if I had read this, 2006 when I was in high school, it could have been much more original. And it's just the newer fantasies have made a lot of what was in it very tropey of an archetypal, not archetypal, that's the wrong word, stereotypical like fantasy book. So yeah, it gets a 24.5 for story in general. That is plot, characters, world. Ease of reading, I'm giving it a 9 because it is very easy to read. Like I said, I read it in 2.5 weeks, and that was very relaxed reading of just okay, I'm going to bed early. I have, a couple hours. I'll read a couple chapters and get through it. And I didn't want to put it down. So it very much keeps you hooked the whole time. It just keeps going. There are very few times where it stops and breaks and you go okay, there's this break in the story. It very much just keeps rolling very easily, just rolling into the next beat, into the next beat, into the next beat. So I really like the writing style, which is why I'm saying Well of Ascension and Hero of Ages probably won't take me that long. They are a little bigger than Mistborn, so maybe 3 weeks to a month. But yeah, so I know from his reading list or his reading order recommendation, he says Elantris is a little tougher to read because it was one of his earlier works, but just reading Mistborn, I'm pretty sure I'm going to be able to burn through them very quickly. If that is his writing style, it is very easy for me to read. So I'm giving it a 9. And then descriptiveness. Descriptiveness, I'm going to give an 8. It's not, I kind of brought this up in talking about the world, it's not overly descriptive. You're not left with paragraphs of descriptions of this and that. I can't remember what book it was. I started reading a book and I had to put it down. It was through the first chapter. It's because it spent 2 paragraphs describing a chair. And maybe that was important for the plot later on, but something like that is a little too descriptive gets a little too into descriptiveness. I like something that it describes something enough that I can picture it and then we move on. I don't need the full layout of the room of there was a couch here, there was, posters on the wall, there were pillows on the couch, there was a coffee table with a microphone and books on it. Something that descriptive I don't really need. I need basic gist of what the room looks like, where the characters are, what's going on. And Mistborn does that very well. It gives you enough description that you can visually picture something. Everyone probably won't picture the same exact thing, but you can get a visual in your head of, okay, this is what is happening, this is what it looks like, and we're still going. We're not going to stop and build this grand design of a room to then be in there for a page and move to the next room. So, for descriptiveness, I'm going to give it an 8. there were a couple of times I was like, I got a little lost. I was like, okay, like, where are we? And then, like, the next sentence, it mentioned something. I was like, okay, we're moved on to that. Like, I know what's happening, but you lost me for a split second, but now we're moving on. So, descriptiveness, I'm going to give it an 8. So, for prose, that gets a total of 17 out of 20. So, right now, we're at... My laptop keeps turning off. But I have my notes on. 24.5 for story, 17 for prose. That puts us at 41.5. And then general enjoyment, I'm going to give it an 8.5. I won't say it was my favorite fantasy book I've ever read, but it was a very good book. Like I said, I couldn't put it down. I wanted to know what was going to happen as much as I did predict what was going to happen. Like, I was very invested in the characters, invested in the story, and I almost immediately wanted to pick up the next book, to the point that I almost skipped the 11th Metal because I forgot that I had that on my read list between Mistborn and Will of Ascension. So I'm going to give it an 8.5 for general enjoyment out of 10. Just, it was a really good book, and I highly recommend it. So total score on the numeral score, it's a total score of 50 out of 60. So right now it's the first one I'm reviewing. It's up at the top. Like I said, the first 4 chapters of Will of Ascension I've already read. It's probably gonna be pretty close between the two, and then we'll see where the rest of the series goes. But again, highly recommend it. If you are a fan of magic systems and you're a fan of fantasy books, I highly recommend it. Funny enough, I was reading it. I was doing some smoking for meats and stuff for I think it was a birthday party. I can't remember. I was doing a very long smoke, and I was reading it sitting outside, and some of the kids came up and were like, "Oh, like they look like a superhero," and I'm like, "Well, they kind of are. Like they're pretty much able to fly. They're super strong. They have super senses." So if you were a fan of superheroes or very powerful magic systems, I very much recommend Mistborn. So yeah, that is my review of Mistborn and kind of a light review on 11th Metal. Like I said, the 11th Metal, I think it's only like 20 pages, 24 pages. So yeah, the 11th Metal is 24 pages of like kind of small print, but it's like I said, I think I read it in half an hour. But it's a very good additive to Mistborn to explain Kelsier's motivations. Like, you kind of already have his motivations in Mistborn of why he hates nobles, but this just solidifies it. So yeah, that is my review on Mistborn. If you like the video, once again, please think about subscribing. Like I said, the next video will probably be shorter because I won't have the whole preamble ahead of time about what I'm doing. But yeah, next we will be reviewing Well of Ascension when I'm done with that. And yeah, we'll see if it's as good, if not better, than Mistborn. I am already assuming I'm going to like it better, just from what I've read. But we will find out. Yeah, if you like the video, please subscribe, like the video, and thanks for watching. I will see you next time. See ya.